I had a fantasy. Well, I've had a couple of fantasy jobs. I'm pretty fortunate in that way. My nana always said, if you do what you love, you never working. So I've had some long periods of never working because I get to do a lot of what I love. And one of those jobs was working a bookstore. And I was a bookseller and I was a manager in the cafe department. So I had coffee, I had books, I had fresh cookies. You couldn't tell me nothing. You know what I'm saying? I don't care that they was paying me peanuts and pennies on a dollar. I had access to every book, every magazine, new coffees, and fresh baked cookies and pretzels. I was in my own little world. And and in that, we had an inventory that would come in, once a week, and we would get these listing of all the books that were coming out and things like that. And I found that there were a lot of young adult books that were coming out that, even though they were young adult, they were very interesting, very compelling. They spoke to your imagination. We think things like Twilight, all these things like that. Now, again, all these books are not for everyone, because somebody be like, don't man want to read about no romantic vampires, and you never know, you know what I'm saying? You can't judge a book by its cover. And so, in thinking about Virgo season, much like Aquarians, they are very analytical. They spend a lot of their time thinking, deep things, about, life and finances, and, they're very hard workers, and, but they love mysteries. You know what I mean? They love mysteries. They love that good whodunit. They love good investigational type things. They love historical fiction, things like that. And they love romanticism. You know what I mean? A lot of people don't know that about Virgos. They're crazy romantic on the low, you know what I mean? So, you got to think about that opposite polarity, Pisces. So, they can go there, so in choosing this book, I said, what is something that one of my Virgos would love to read, but nobody would ever think that they would read it? And I came up with this baby right here.
Okay, let me blow it up. Let me blow it up so I can see it. Stalking Jack the Ripper. Ooh, that's
Stalking Jack the Ripper by Kerri Maniscalco. Scalico. I can't never say her name right, but I'll put it up here for everybody. I'm sorry, ma'am. No disrespect to your name. But this book, I got it in one of my favorite places, Nick. Where was I at? In the Barnes and Noble Cafe.
There you go.
I was in the Barnes and Noble Cafe, and they had a author kind of, special thing going on. If you buy this author, you get a free cookie. You buy this author, you get a, large upgrade on your coffee, whatever. And this was one of the ones they had at the desk. So it's a historical fiction, obviously dealing with Jack the Ripper. And this writer here is a best-selling author. Excuse me, I was getting myself ready. She's best-selling author, known for her Kingdom of the Wicked series, which I haven't read that one. This is one of her first books, and it's Maniscalco. That's how you say it. I want to try to say her name right. I hate saying people's name wrong because I hate when people say my name wrong. But anyway, this book here is set in 1888. I thought you'd like those numbers.
Yeah, 888.
And it was if you're not familiar with some of that historical stuff that was going on back then, young women weren't really looked at in a serious manner in terms of certain, workspaces, schools, things like that. So there was a young lady, you know, our main character here, you know, Audrey Rose, and she is fascinated with death. And so I was thinking, you know, I said, think Dexter as a young girl in 1888. You know what I'm saying? Think Dexter as a young girl, 1888. So she would, you know, no big spoilers. You know, she basically loved death. Her mother had recently died. It's her and her brother and her dad. And she has an uncle who they are never really clear whether he does the, you know, whether he's just a mortician or, you know, more like a all around autopsy man, because again, we're still talking about 1888. So, you know, they had no real defined roles. You could be the priest and the milkman, you know, so, you know, he dealt with the dead bodies. And she was fascinated with this. And after her mother's death, she kind of started spending more time sneaking and being with the uncle and learning about, you know, dissecting bodies and things like that. And she really enjoyed it. And, you know, back then, like I said, you know, the women weren't really encouraged to go to school. So she decided that if she was going to be able to get an education, she wanted to go to the Harrow School for Boys. And she had to dress up like a little boy and go to school every day. Now, how they did not know that she was a little boy, I'm not really sure. I've always kind of questioned that. I know, you know, you know, I'm an Annie fan, so I remember the Hard Knock Life little kids, and I know you can pretty much dress up like anything you want. But it was interesting that she went to school and was able to get an education there. And you know, again, she's a young girl. You know, she's, you know, a teenager, and of course there's a young love interest in the class who ends up working for the uncle, and they begin to investigate crimes. So again, think Dexter, Nancy Drew, um uh Jack the Ripper. And so she becomes fascinated with Jack the Ripper, and she even touted herself as, I was the girl who loved stalking the Ripper, because she became obsessed basically with finding out who he was based upon the clues from the leftover bodies that her uncle would dissect. And so she just goes out on a, you know, like I said, a real journey. And it's a quick read. It's only if I'm not mistaken, it's 300 pages. And it even kind of ends with, you know, the author's note kind of telling us the creative liberties taken. And I wanted to mention that because recently, and this is relevant to the story again without giving any spoilers. Recently I had seen two new versions of movies that I'd seen before. And you know, when you've seen or heard a movie or a story a certain way, when you're watching something that's supposed to be it, you tend to look for the things that you looked for in the original. And they were so different that it was like, oh, I didn't consider that take, you know, on that. And that's one of the things that this book did for me, was it was like, oh, I didn't think about if this killer was connected to this particular story or killer. And I like the way that you know, even though it gets a little sappy, simple, I did like the way that it tied in Mary Shelley's Frankenstein as well, because it made you start to think about, you know, who was Jack the Ripper, why was he doing the things that he did, and were, you know, and were some of these killings to what was his motive, you know. And they have some letters in here from Jack the Ripper, and these supposed handwritten letters that, you know, begin to help them dissect the case. And so they even, you know, they do a lot of Sherlock Holmes stuff, obviously, and they talk about the cemetery station and the bodies that were missing, and that's where they kind of tied the Frankenstein aspect into it. But again, it's a quick read, short chapters. I'm looking right now, each chapter is maybe like, I don't know, 3-5 pages. A lot of older pictures to try to keep you in that memory that you are reading a book that is from a particular period. Again, 1888, September 1888 to be specific on this page that I'm talking about here. They, you know, again, obviously go through a number of suspects, and I love this picture here.
Hold on. Let me put that up on the solo screen.
Gotta love that, you know.
Gotta
love that.
Give my man some ointment.
And you know, I really, like I said, it's a quick read. It's not for those looking for anything deep. But it's, you know, like I said, it's a different take on a story from somebody else's perspective of looking into why, you know, Jack the Ripper did the things he did, his patterns, you know, and what his possible motive could have been from a young girl's fantasy mind and, you know, romantic type mind. And again, like I said, it follows her through her obsession of figuring out you know, what was really his motives and why he's never been found. And you know, I love esoteric art. We know this, right? So one of the things I loved about the cover was that you see the butterfly kind of in the background there. Mm-hmm. You see the butterfly. And you know, we know the butterfly is as a representation of things like metamorphosis and growth and all of that. And what we find in this book is that our character, our main character, she grows up in this story, and some of the things that she was naive about, you know, quickly become realities, and she knows that things that she thought once were are not, and that everything is not what it appears to be, and so is and everyone is not who they appear to be. And we can assume that we know someone or what they're capable of, and she quickly finds out that that's not how life works. So of course I use my unread books mark. Everybody that has not got their bookmark, get some bookmarks. They come in all colors.
Yeah, put that up again. Yeah.
Get you some bookmarks. Yep, I signed them. Some of them I do. This one was to a special young man, my son. Got to send it over there to the UK. Where, let me just say, he walks down very Jack the Ripperish, the Ripper type blocks all the time. I'm always asking him, how can he walk down those dark, secluded little alleyways? I told him I see how Jack the Ripper got away with a lot of the stuff he did, because man, them little alleys look crazy. But yeah, it's a good book, quick read. Recommended for those who just are looking for something to pique their interest. A whodunit short, you know. Mm-hmm. It like I said, I enjoyed it, and I enjoyed the way it ended. You know, making you look forward to reading the next book in the series. I believe she is making this a series, and then it says because she goes on here at the end to say, first she stalked Jack the Ripper. This time things are about to get even bloodier as she goes after the Prince of Dracula, the Prince Dracula.
Uh-oh.
So hunting Prince Dracula is the next one in that series.
Woo!
So
yeah,
like I said, it's a lot of fun. And if you are into vampires and resurrection of dead bodies and all these good things like that, and like I said, Dexter as a young 1888 girl, just really looking like obsessed with blood and gore and why is this person dead? So a lot of fun.
Yeah. Wow. Yup. Yeah. So that's your leisure example of leisure reading right there.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
So a cup of tea, some cookies, afternoon, and today was set up. It was so gray and rainy. It would have been one of those like, and then the sun came out. So ain't nobody trying to sit around while the sun is out. But for all my folks who love a good quick read, you know what I'm saying? This is a great one. I enjoyed it. And like I said, it's young adult, so it's not heady, if you will, but it is detailed enough to let you know that it's not for small children. It's young adult. It's a lot of fun.
Indeed.
And you can find a lot of young adult books that are a lot of fun,
Oh,
so.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. You named a couple of the fun
yeah,
ones. Yeah.
Yeah. Maze Runner is one of my favorites. The Twilight series was fun. Things like, I love the Guardians of Gaul, which is even younger adult than that. So I love my young adult books in my leisure time. Those are the kind of books I like to read. So that's a good one. Stalking Jack the Ripper, good for my Virgos. Mystery, whodunit, historical fiction, and mystery. So yeah, for my Virgos. Happy Virgo season.
Yes, I love it. And shout out to Shawan West in the chat. Shawan's hanging out with us on UnRead. And I asked Shawan what she's currently reading, and she just picked up The Awakening by Kate Chopin, and who I'm familiar with. I've read one or two of her stories in class. I read Story of an Hour, short story with my I think I read it with my 9th graders, years ago.
Okay.
But Kate Chopin. I think I've either read a poem during my advanced placement English literature training a couple weeks ago. It was either a poem or another short story. But
all right.
Shout out to Shawan, one of my.
Thank you, Shawan.
One of my astronumerologist family members.
Thank you for being here. I appreciate you.
Yes. But hunting. Wait. I'll put it back on the screen.
Stalking Jack the Ripper.
Stalking. I'm about to say hunting. Yeah, stalking Jack the Ripper.
And next is hunting Prince. The Prince of Blood, Vlad.
Man, we got
Prince Dracula.
We got stalking, hunting. What else we gonna have?
You know what? I don't know. We gotta watch out for where she goes. But I think I really, you look at these things like this, and I think about my childhood and how we were taught to romanticize in some of these places, in terms of, this big grandiose, everything was lovely, but then there was this whole other side of things that was going on. You hear about things like Jekyll and Hyde and Frankenstein and Jack the Ripper, and a lot of people don't even know about Jack the Ripper's son, but that's a whole nother story. So again, if you love those kind of books, you really enjoy this. Quick read, lots of fun, and shout out to everybody that's joining us. If you like quick reads, you'll enjoy that one.
Yes, yes, and it's we get two genres in there. You get a taste of fiction and you get a taste of history.
Yes.
So so it's a great way. It's a great way to engage someone or hook someone into studying more about that historical character in those historical events, through the fictional stories, because sometimes history can be a little dry. Obviously not Jack the Ripper, but but historical fiction is a great way to hook someone into studying more or researching more about certain historical topics. So I do appreciate the historical fiction genre there. You kind of get the best of both worlds there.
Yeah,
But but it's important to, but it's also important to recognize what's historical and what's dramatized.
Right. And I was gonna say, like, I think one of the things that made me pick this book this time and it being so interesting is that the fact that there was never really a close to that case. Any person that loves to write with an imagination can sit down and write their version of this story, and it'll be new and it can't be said to be wrong because we still don't know, supposedly who Jack the Ripper was, why he did what he did. I even say if Jack the Ripper was a man at all, know what I mean? Because I've even seen some places like that hung that out there as a theory that he may not have been a man at all. It may have been more than one person. So I mean, I think that with a book like this, like you said, it does give you some stuff to, if you are a super sleuth, you maybe go in and you might be the one to find out who Jack the Ripper is, because they still don't know. And I think you could just really come up with some great stories, and it reminded me also that history is his story. This is one person's version of what could have been. So when we read books, no matter what kind, we have to remember that it's coming from somebody's perspective, and we should still do our due diligence and go in and search things out for ourselves. And it don't always have to be super heady. It can be fun like this.
Yes, it can. Yes, it can. Yep. So great offering there. I'm definitely intrigued myself.
Yes, and again, apologies to the author that I couldn't say your name right and exact the first time.
Yep. Well, we got the correct spelling now.
Yes, we do. We got
the cover of the book, and I got the correct spelling on the screen there.
Maniscalco.
Yeah.
Maniscalco. I couldn't get it right the first time. I was tongue-tied. But I really enjoyed the book. I really did.